June 1940. France is on the verge of defeat and Great Britain is fighting for its life. For Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, this is a historic opportunity to expand the Italian Empire. Instead, Italy suffers a series of humiliating disasters. So why did Mussolini declare war on the Allies at this moment? And could Germany be ultimately responsible for the Italian fiasco? Unlike Germany, Italy has few concrete plans for action at the outbreak of World War II. Still, Germany's expansion of the war in 1940 provides an unmistakable opportunity for Rome. On June 10th, Italy declares war on the Allies. Mussolini hopes contributing to German victory may earn him major gains, like the seizure of the French fleet, the occupation of France and Corsica, and French colonies like Tunisia or French Somaliland. Italy belatedly joins the German invasion of France through the Western Alps, but the army's poor performance and German desires for a cooperative, neutral Vichy French regime mean that when France surrenders on June 22nd, Italy gains little. Italian actions, though, do trigger a crisis in London. As British invasion fears grow, so does the need to secure the Mediterranean as a vital link to the empire. Since the mid-1930s, Italy has expanded its imperial reach in Africa and the Balkans, and the British worry because of their high estimations of Italian capabilities. The Royal Navy initially recalls ships from the Mediterranean fleet to British waters, but Churchill cancels the move. Britain's strategy is to turn the war into a longer, attritional conflict, and it requires the Mediterranean and access to its wider empire to do it. On June 11th, Italy bombs British-controlled Malta, but elsewhere, Britain takes the initiative. From June 10th, British armored cars and tanks raid across the Egyptian border into Italian Libya. Most Italian troops lack heavy modern equipment or experience in modern war. Instead, they're trained for colonial pacification. In one engagement, Italian forces form a 19th century-style fighting square, which British tanks easily destroy. In 3 months of combat, the Italians suffer 3,500 casualties for Britain's 150. Britain can't go on a wider offensive because it too lacks men and materiel. Meanwhile, French capitulation frees up Italian forces, and Mussolini demands an invasion of Egypt to eliminate the main British Mediterranean port of Alexandria and seize the Suez Canal. But his commanders are reluctant. After friendly fire kills respected Commander-in-Chief Italo Balbo, Rodolfo Graziani takes over. He's a desert expert, but his experience is mostly against Senussi tribesmen. Mussolini is encouraged by Italian success in East Africa, where his colonial forces have pushed back a small British garrison. But although Graziani outnumbers the roughly 36,000 British-led troops, he lacks vehicles, water, and supplies. After lengthy delays and pressure from Rome, he reluctantly invades British Egypt on September 13th, setting a modest first objective of Sidi Barrani, 80 kilometers from the border. As Italian troops advance, Graziani makes a grandiose statement. One wonders when the English will begin to understand that they have just dealt with the best fitted-out colonial army in the world, and when they finally learn to appreciate the valor of the Italian soldier. British troops withdraw, and Graziani orders his men to build fortified camps around Sidi Barrani, again following colonial practices. Mussolini pressures him to advance another 130 kilometers along the coast, but Graziani knows his troops are unlikely to make it. Although Mussolini encourages a push into Egypt, he also has imperial ambitions closer to home. In 1939, Italy established a protectorate in Albania. From there, Italy looks to expand into Yugoslavia or Greece to link up with the Italian islands in the Aegean. Rome considers Yugoslavia too pro-German though, so they turn to Greece. Mussolini's foreign minister and son-in-law, Galeazzo Ciano, urges action. He claims Greek forces are corrupt and inept, Greek civilians are indifferent, and Albanian minorities in Greece will welcome Italians as liberators. But King Vittorio Emanuele, Italian ambassador in Greece Emanuele Grazzi, and Chief of Staff Pietro Badoglio are skeptical. The Greeks are good fighters. They showed it in their last war with Turkey. They were defeated, but they fought valiantly. But Mussolini and Ciano ignore these warnings. Germany is also against an invasion. They need peace in the Balkans to extract war materials, and an Italian attack could encourage British intervention. Britain guaranteed Greek neutrality in April 1939, and the presence of British aircraft in Greece could threaten Romanian oil fields. Germany accepts that Greece is in Italy's sphere of influence, but wants any invasion delayed until after Britain's defeat. Mussolini agrees. After the German Luftwaffe moves into Romania to protect the oil fields, though, an outraged Mussolini accelerates plans to invade despite his promises. Hitler always faces me with a fait accompli. This time, I am going to pay him back in his own coin. He will find out from the papers that I have occupied Greece. In this way, the equilibrium will be re-established. Italian plans grow from a partial to a complete occupation of Greece. But Italian planning is rushed and complicated by mass demobilization for the harvest, unenthusiastic officers, and a lack of suitable Albanian ports. The only usable port for troops, Durazzo, is already clogged with barges carrying marble for fascist building projects. As a result, not all troops have their heavy weapons. Mussolini hopes Bulgaria will join in the attack, but the Bulgarian king refuses. By late October, around 6 Italian divisions, including the crack Giulia Alpini division, are moving towards the Greek-Albanian border. The 87,000 Italian troops expect to oppose around 30,000 Greeks, despite intelligence suggesting 10 times as many may be available. Italy's aggressive rhetoric and poor operational security means Greek dictator Ioannis Metaxas is aware of Italian intentions. He hopes for an orderly withdrawal as far as Mount Othris, although some commanders prefer a more aggressive plan. Luckily for the Greeks, the border's mountainous terrain limits Italian invasion routes. Mussolini starts the invasion on October 28th, the date of Hitler's planned visit to Florence. He plans to surprise his ally with news of imminent victory. At 3 a.m. after staging border incidents, Ambassador Grazzi issues Metaxas an ultimatum: allow Italy to occupy key strategic locations in Greece or face war. Metaxas responds in diplomatic French: Alors, c'est la guerre. Well then, it's war. His response is later popularized as an emphatic ochi, or no. In reality, Italian troops like Lieutenant Genserico Fontana are moving before the ultimatum was delivered. The night is dark and rainy. Tomorrow, we may hope that Mars will favor us. Even though we are few, we have no fear. We have our hand grenades in our pockets, and they don't weigh much. Here comes the dawn, dismal and soundless. In the opening attack, the Ferrara, Siena and Centauro divisions with 163 light tanks push into the Kalamas River Valley towards Ioannina, while the Giulia division attacks in the center around Mount Smolikas. A smaller force pushes along the coast. Although the Greeks expected Italian aggression, the rank and file are still shocked when it actually comes. We woke up around 6:30. We heard thunder from the west. Its brightness was mirrored on the clouds. A rumor was spread that war was declared between Greece and Italy. It was a shock. Nobody expected this news. Our hearts froze. Initial Greek resistance is light, but rain slows down the Italians. Greek 8th Division Commander General Katsimitros decides to make a stand at Kalpaki, where the Italians have to cross a plain. From November 2nd, Italian columns enter the area and come under artillery fire from well-concealed positions. The Greeks lack anti-tank weapons, but their artillery scatters the Italian tanks, while infantry improvise by throwing blankets onto light tanks' tracks to immobilize them. As the Italians attempt to push through the plain, fighting centers on Krampala Hill, which changes hands several times. As the weather clears, Italian aircraft bomb Greek positions. An airplane bomb whistled over me and fell into the forest, 20 meters below my tent. A fellow soldier shouted for his foot and called for help. I approached the bomb crater, a body drowned in blood without skull or brains. Beside him, a corporal was still alive. with an open wound in his back and his intestines poured out. He died in my arms. My heart was completely broken from the horror. While the Italians struggle at Kalpaki, the Julia division hits Greek positions in the Pindus Mountains. They make early progress against Greek reservists, but sporadic Greek sniping and poor weather exhaust and disorganize the attackers. After Greek reinforcements stall the Italian advance on November 2nd, the Greeks counterattack, capturing Samarina and threatening to cut off the Italians. By November 8th, the Greeks capture Distrato, forcing the Julia to withdraw. In 2 weeks of fighting, the Julia division loses a fifth of its strength. The Greek army now moves over to the offensive, even invading Albania in the north. A frustrated Mussolini orders his air force to bomb all Greek towns of over 10,000 people. The Italian air force has already bombed Athens and other towns with little effect, which denies frontline Italian forces desperately needed air support. In Rome, there's tension and even talks of truce. Reluctant Italian ministers even consider asking for German help. Hitler is furious when informed about the invasion during the meeting in Florence, as his adjutant recalls. Führer, in a rage, observed that this occurrence had spoiled many plans he had in mind, and doubted if the Italians would be able to defeat Greece. Things do not improve for Italy in November. On November 11th-12th, the British attacked the Italian fleet at Taranto with carrier-based torpedo bombers, disabling 3 battleships in a surprise raid. Meanwhile, the struggle in Albania ties down reinforcements and equipment desperately needed in North Africa. By December, UK invasion fears have eased, and more British and Commonwealth troops and equipment arrive in Alexandria, including Matilda tanks and Hurricane fighters. Western Desert Force Commander Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor realizes the role mechanized forces and surprise can play in a desert environment. The Matilda, considered invulnerable to most Italian weapons, plays a major role in the upcoming Operation Compass. In early December, British-led forces, including many Indian troops, gather in the Egyptian desert. British naval bombardment and air attack destroy Italian aircraft and divert attention from the buildup. The Italians partially detect it, but aren't worried. Early on December 9th, British forces rush Nibewa through poorly laid Italian minefields. The 23 Italian M11 tanks are outmatched and surprised, and Matildas quickly destroy 13. An Italian doctor describes the scene. "It was the nearest thing to hell I ever saw." Italian troops with no anti-tank weapons resort to tossing grenades onto British tanks, but despite fierce resistance, it's a one-sided battle. The British capture 4,000 Italians and suffer just 2 killed and 5 wounded. After securing Nibewa, the British assault the camp at Tumar West and defeat a counterattack from Tumar East. Meanwhile, the 4th Armoured Brigade moves to cut the Sidi Barani to Bardia Road. The next day, the assault continues, although severe sandstorms and accurate Italian artillery delay Selby force in the east. In some cases, British columns simply follow a compass bearing through the storms towards their target. The British capture Mactila with the aid of naval gunfire, but Italian resistance at Sidi Barani is fierce, forcing Selby force to temporarily withdraw. Italian morale, though, is crashing. Tumar East and Point 90 surrender, and as artillery, air power, and Matildas concentrate on Sidi Barani, it too surrenders. British mobile forces race west to capture fleeing Italians. A British soldier reports to his regimental headquarters about the mass of prisoners. "Have arrived at the 2nd B in Book. As far as I can see, there are 20 acres of officers and 100 acres of men." In the first 3 days, the British capture 38,000 Italian troops, 237 guns, and 73 tanks. But the Italians are not completely defeated, and they fall back to new positions further west. As Italian forces pull back in North Africa, more Greek advances in Albania cap off a disastrous year for Mussolini. Far from forging a new Mediterranean empire, Italian forces are being pushed back across the entire theater. In early December, Mussolini relieves Badoglio in favor of Ugo Cavallero, and Rome introduces wider mobilization and rationing. A new recruit recalls, Now they're calling up more age groups. We don't understand anything anymore, and what we hear is pretty bad. For the time being, while they're just handing us empty chatter, all we can do is trust in God. There's no doubt that by the end of 1940, Italy had suffered a series of military disasters. So why did Italian forces do so badly? After the war, some historians emphasized the poor quality of Italian troops, low morale, a lack of equipment, and Mussolini's personality. They claim Mussolini rushed into a war for imperialistic reasons without adequate preparation and relied on optimistic propaganda as opposed to realistic military assessments. Only 19 of Italy's 73 divisions were ready in 1940, and its smaller economic base hindered mobilization. Italy accounted for only 2.7% of world manufacturing output, compared to Britain's 9.2% and Germany's 10.7%. Observers also blame Italian equipment. Italy relied heavily on obsolete World War I weaponry to equip its troops. This is partially true of all militaries at the time, but Italy's lower industrial base prevented rapid development of new equipment or mass production of higher quality weaponry like the 90mm anti-aircraft gun or Beretta Model 1938 submachine gun. A reliance on older equipment meant Italian officers fell back on older methods of warfare, especially colonial policing. When modern equipment was available, they sent it first to police units as opposed to front-line combatants. As a result, Italian troops lacked automatic weapons, vehicles, radios, and anti-tank weaponry, as well as the tactical and technical skills for their use. Most of the Italian rank and file were peasants, and class differences, poor conditions, and harsh discipline created clashes with conservative officers. One conscript, mobilized in June 1940, referenced rebellions by Italian troops back in 1917. All the officers have become like beasts, and they issue punishments fit to break your neck. But once we're on the move, they'll pay for it. We'll do like they did in the last war. But a lack of equipment was only part of the problem. In Greece, Italian troops were similarly equipped to Greek troops. The failed invasion of Greece is therefore more a result of poor terrain, planning, and logistics. Internal Italian planning was dysfunctional. All important naval logistical routes were badly prepared, and the Italian Navy learned about the planned invasion less than 2 weeks in advance. The Italians had accurate information on Greek troop numbers, which far exceeded Ciano's optimistic assessment, but the High Command ignored it. As a result, Italian troops struggled to even achieve numerical parity with Greek defenders. They also relied too much on hopeful outcomes that they couldn't control, like Bulgarian assistance and a pro-Italian uprising in Greece. Some historians also argue that Mussolini's fervent, long-standing desire for an expanded Italian empire is the cause of all these failures. But another view places the blame partly elsewhere. There is an argument that Germany plays a more significant role in Italian failures than previously thought, and although Mussolini may have roused Italian patriotism with talk of empire, he knew Italy was unprepared for war. Unpreparedness was not a uniquely Italian problem either. Although only 24% of Italian divisions were ready in 1940, just 34% of German divisions were similarly prepared in September 1939. Mussolini may have been a much less enthusiastic participant in the so-called Pact of Steel with Germany than commonly believed. Historian James Sadkovich suggests Mussolini joined the Axis partly to restrain Hitler's expansionism and even considered breaking the alliance in December 1939. In any case, there was little practical cooperation, and both sides kept their plans from the other. Sadkovich also argues Mussolini's decision to join the war was more about avoiding punishment by a dominant Germany for past transgressions than imperial goals. Until mid-1940, Mussolini's imperial dream was mostly limited to the Balkan coast and weaker African nations. But Mussolini had encouraged Austria to resist the Anschluss in 1938 and failed to join the war in 1939, both of which frustrated Hitler. Unexpected German victories, including a seemingly imminent one against Britain, might have encouraged Mussolini to make more maximalist imperial claims and act prematurely, not necessarily just because of Allied weakness, but due to concerns that Germany would capitalize on its position to expand into Italy's sphere of influence in the Balkans. In this circumstance, Italian actions in Egypt can be seen as securing the Greek front, as opposed to outright imperial conquest. It's claimed Mussolini hoped to fight a so-called guerra paralela, a parallel war, to the wider Second World War. However, doing so inevitably brought Italy into conflict with Britain, which was fighting a total war. In this circumstance, Italy became overextended across the Mediterranean, which was only of secondary importance to its German ally, but of vital importance to Britain. Still, Italy overstretched itself based on the assumption Germany would soon invade Britain. The distrust, suspicion, and lack of communication between the Axis, however, meant Mussolini didn't know about Germany's lack of will and capability to launch that invasion, or Germany's shift to prioritizing an invasion of the Soviet Union. Italy therefore became embroiled in a long, multi-front war that its smaller economy simply could not maintain. According to Sadkovich, it was the disparity in equipment and motorization between the British and Italian troops, not inherent low morale or fighting ability of Italian troops, which caused the mass surrenders during Compass. Italian troops simply could not withdraw on foot across the desert. And British accounts do speak of fierce Italian resistance during the battle. Sadkovich concludes that Anglo-American historians are influenced by stereotypes in their writing about Italian fighting ability, and suggests Italian troops are unfairly compared to German troops, who had the benefit of better equipment and better leadership. Some historians may also exaggerate German abilities to excuse Allied failings or aggrandize their own eventual victory. It is thus normal to dismiss as loss of nerve Graziani's request for permission to retreat in late 1940, even though a rapid retreat seems to have been what was needed. At the same time, Anglo-American writers tend to depict Rommel's various retreats as evidence of military genius. While accepting weak Italian industrialization and command did play an issue, this line of reasoning also highlights Germany's failure to force Britain into an all-out defense of the British Isles. This allowed Britain to invest significant resources into North Africa, turning it into a wider war than Italy could or even wanted to fight. It might have been German management of the wider war and pursuit of their own interest in the Balkans, rather than Italian inherent weakness or expansionism, that laid the foundations for Italian failure in 1940. But of course, this is still up for debate. That Italy did experience disaster after disaster is not debatable, and in fall 1940, Italy reluctantly seeks German help. Germany, which has paid little attention to Italian capabilities or needs, agrees to shore up a seemingly unreliable ally. As one Wehrmacht commander put it, help was unwillingly given and unwillingly accepted. On December 14th, Hitler issues Directive No. 20, ordering preparations for wider German intervention in Greece. Meanwhile, as Italian troops continue to fall back in North Africa into early 1941, a newly promoted German commander and his troops are heading for Libya, Erwin Rommel and the Afrika Korps. In World War II, after Rommel's campaigns in northern Africa, in 1944 he took over Army Group B in northern France, which was preparing for the Allied invasion. He argued unsuccessfully for the Germans to concentrate their tanks close to the beaches and organize the Normandy defenses. But he was soon badly wounded and implicated in the July plot against Hitler, and then he committed suicide. Meanwhile, Army Group B was eventually pushed back across the Rhine River and encircled in the Ruhr pocket. If you want to learn more about the last battles of the Second World War in the East and in the West, we made 2 epic documentaries about them. The first one is 16 Days in Berlin, the most detailed documentary about the Battle of Berlin ever produced. A 4.5-hour day-by-day breakdown of one of the biggest battles of the entire war, when the Red Army advanced from the Oder River into the heart of Nazi Germany's capital. Filmed on original location, featuring detailed maps and animations, expert interviews, and much more. The second documentary is Rhineland 45, about the last set-piece battle on the Western Front, in which the Allies under Bernard Montgomery attacked from the Dutch border and ultimately crossed the mighty Rhine River. This 3.5-hour documentary was also filmed on original location and features detailed maps and animations, expert and veteran interviews, and more. But you can't watch 16 Days in Berlin or Rhineland 45 on YouTube because of our uncompromising portrayal of the war using authentic combat footage. So where can you watch these 2 massive documentaries with a combined runtime of over 8 hours? On Nebula, a streaming service we're building together with other creators, where we don't have to worry about YouTube's advertising guidelines and the mighty algorithm. If you go to nebula.tv/realtimehistory, you can watch Rhineland 45, our other original documentaries, 16 Days in Berlin and Red Atoms, as well as a host of other smart creators. And all that for just $36 for an entire year. Nebula is also a great gift, by the way. Just go to gift.nebula.tv/realtimehistory to gift an entire year to family and friends, even if they already have an account. We want to thank Marcus Linke, Athanasio Valantis, and Dr. Vanda Wilcox for their help with this episode. Check out our episode about the Battle of Tunisia to learn more about the end of the North Africa campaign in 1943. As usual, you can find all the sources for this video in the description below. If you're watching this video on Nebula or Patreon, thank you so much for the support. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real Time History, the only history channel that also wonders when the English will begin to understand.